All right, so we built our first object. We built a house. Now we want to do stuff with it. We want to change it somehow. Maybe we want to repaint this house, or maybe we want to change the location. So like we were saying, it makes not a lot of sense to destroy a whole object just to do something minor to it. So how can we make it a little bit more flexible? Well, interfaces are the answer. And what we're going to do is create two interface methods. One for repainting our house and one for moving our house. So let's get started. So we're going to dive into some code. We're going to kind of pick up where we left off. So feel free to kind of follow along if you wish, and maybe add this code to your own. That's kind of going to be the goal at the end of this activity, is to add your own interfaces. So let's go ahead here and start with that. So first things first, we are done with our constructor. So we need to kind of get a little space, but then we need to hit the delete key. And you might notice this green bar here is kind of stays there, but it stops where we hit that backspace. And that's because that's the end of the constructor. And we're going to make it, basically, we're going to start a new function or method. And once again, a function or a method are these things that basically we can call to do things for us. They're kind of the interfaces, they're the buttons, they're the things that allow us to interact with our object. So I'm going to go ahead here and define a new method, and let's think about our name. What do we want to name this? Since we're repainting a house, I think it makes sense to keep it quite kind of straightforward. So we're going to just call it repaint underscore house. And you might notice we're using the same type of language, or at least kind of the style, as variables. And that's the case with methods and functions in Python using the naming conventions. So we're going to go ahead here and open up our parentheses just like we did in the constructor. So I'm going to go ahead here and type in. So if we're going to repaint it, what do we need? Well, first thing we need, and this is really key, is we need that self again. Once again, we need to basically receive, when we're calling this method, when we're telling it to check this method, we need to say, all right, what do you have in you, the object that's being handed? So we need that self again. And then we need to ask for some sort of color. So I'm just going to call it color. And there we go. So we got self and color. I'm going to go ahead and hit return here. Or actually, one second. Almost forgot one thing. We need a colon here. Colon. And you might notice the green bar starts again, but this green bar is now for our repaint house. Now we might be thinking, okay, now we need to go find something that lets us change colors of something, of our sprites, but we're not quite there yet. First, we want to do something which is kind of important housekeeping. We want to make sure that we're changing the house color of our actual object, our instance variable, so that it will be able to maybe remember what color it is. Maybe we have something important that checks on what color it is, and that's an important thing to remember. So we're going to do that. We're going to go ahead and set the color, the house color, to the color that we're giving it. And now we're going to find something that lets us change the color of house. Now, we use these Codester objects to create our house objects. We use little objects. Well, guess what? These little objects have methods that allow us to interface, and we saw them before. And one of them, if we go to shapes and we scroll down, we're going to see some shape settings. and inside there you're going to see set color. So I'm going to choose set color. Now we might notice it's kind of defaulting again. So we want to set color, and the color of our house, we remember, is self.house. That's the sprite in charge of our house kind of box. And we want to set it not to this color red. That would make every house red when we said repaint house, which might be cool if we wanted to repaint all the houses red. But we want to make sure we choose that color. So I'm going to say self.house color. And I'm just doing that because it really clarifies that that house color has changed. It really signifies that. And then it's not probably repainted unless the roof is also repainted. So we're going to roof.set color. And this is the power of making these interfaces, is that we can now actually change multiple things with a single line of code. This would have taken us 2 lines of code to repaint our house. We would have had to ask for these objects. And once again, we might want to be careful. Maybe we don't want to give the user the ability, the person programming it, the ability to repaint a house that has a different color for the roof than the actual house itself. So once again, this is kind of that protection that we're doing. We're giving the person who's going to use this house object some rules about how it can be used at least. So now if I run this, let's go ahead here, and I got my 3 houses. Maybe I want to turn the greenhouse pink. Let's go ahead and do that. So we got this new method. Let's go and call it. So we're going to go ahead and hit greenhouse. Type that in. Now here's where things are a little different. We're not using equals. We're going to use that dot, and we're going to call the repaint underscore house method, and we're going to give it a color, pink. All right. And you might notice it changed that to white, and that's a really key thing, is that it's realizing, wait a second, that's not a variable, that is a method that I can do. And it's also this dot, remember, that's accessing the greenhouse and saying, do you have something in you that can repaint you? Well, let's see what happens. There we go. We got a pink house now. Awesome. Redecoration all done. So we made a pink house. Let's go ahead and make one more interface. So we don't have to destroy our entire house to repaint it, but maybe we also don't want to destroy our whole house if we want to move it. You might have seen this happen before, where they put entire houses on trailers and move them around. Well, maybe we want to do somewhat the same thing in the virtual world. We want to move our entire house to a new position on the canvas. So I'm going to define a new function, and we're going to call this move house. Let's call that. And you can think of if you have a better name for it, but I think move house is good. So we're going to go ahead here, call that self again, and now we need to get the X and Y position that we want to. So we're going to do X position and Y position. And we're going to close that, put our colon, hit our return. Once again, now we're inside this method. All right, we're going to set the self.x position because that's important. And we're going to equal to x position. So once again, kind of what we did in the constructor. We're once again taking those and making sure that the house remembers these values, because if we didn't, we could move the house, but then it would still think it's back in the old position because the constructor told it where it was. And that would be like picking up the house and moving it to a new town and keeping the old address. All your mail would go to the wrong place. So we don't want that to happen. So we're going to make sure that we change those instance variables too. just as kind of a little bit of housekeeping, making sure, even if we're maybe not using these right now, it's just good to keep track of that. All right, so now let's go ahead here and let's create our movement. Now we're going to use the move set X and set Y. So we actually have to set these individually. So for each object, we're going to have 2 of these. So this is going to get a little long, but I'm going to show you something cool at the end that's going to really make this a lot easier. Remember, we got to make sure they're on that. So we're going to do 2 there. We're going to do this this is going to be the self.house. And this is going to be the self.house again. And then we're going to do another set X and another set Y. And this will be for the roof. And make sure I do the self.roof. So we don't want to move the house without the roof. That would get a little troublesome, because then we would have a rainy roof. All right, X and Y. And one thing I can do to kind of speed this up is I can just copy these 2. So I need one more for, let's see here. We got the roof, we got the door. Don't want to forget the door behind. All right, so we're going to get that. And we're going to also get the windows. Don't want to forget those windows either. Would be a shame to leave our windows behind. All right, so we're going to get those. Now look at how, just note, this is how much trouble it would be, how much code it would take to move our house from one location to another without having to destroy it. Now, the cool thing is we don't actually have to write all this code every time, because we're defining a move house method. So we only have to do this work once. So we're going to now go ahead here and we're going to make sure that these go to the right position. So this one is going to go to this position. So we're going to put that there. And we're going to, and here's the only tricky thing. We have to kind of remember that our house is basically built by these being in slightly different positions. We don't want them all stacked up on top of each other. So just be aware that you need to look at your constructor and see, okay, self.x position for the house is just X position. There's no adding. And same for the roof. We're not moving that. And same for the door. We're not moving that. Okay. Windows are going to be basically self X position, and it's -30 plus self X position and also 30. Just like we did in the constructor above, we got to just kind of follow those same values so that all of our pieces of our house stay in the right configuration. We don't want the door where the window was. We don't want it when we move the house to have some problems. So now we do the Y. It looks like the Y position on the house is just the same. And this one, I think, was 75. Yep, 75 plus. We don't want to make a little mistake here. All right. Door position is, I believe, -30. -30 plus. And then these are, the windows are actually just the Y. And if you made different values, you might have to go back and actually adjust those to yours. And don't worry, run your program, see what kind of messed up when it moved. So here we are, we got all of our move house defined. Let's go ahead and move the greenhouse again. So we're changing the color and moving the house. So we got house dot move house. And we're going to give it a value that's fairly far away from where it was. Let's do +200 and +100. and see what happens there. So I've got a feeling it's going to be up in this top right-hand corner. If we got everything right, if we didn't, we'll have to track down some bugs. All right, looks like we got one thing wrong. We have a little line error. 38 has some sort of problem. So let's take a look here. Window, there's my problem. I forgot to put the self. And even sometimes, even the most seasoned coders make mistakes. So let's try that again, see if those windows come along. Let's see here, self, Windows A and B. I did Windows. Plural. There we go. Let's see if they now come across. Oh, they're all over the place. I think I know why. We need to set Y position. Interesting. Oh, that's why. Oh, no. Okay. Interesting. I wonder why we're getting this. Let's take a look. So we're going to come back up here, take a look. Plus 30, minus 30. All right, Windows A and B. Minus 30. X self Y position. Self Y position. All right, that's interesting. Do we have these in wrong order? There's the problem. I did AB. So I was assigning basically the windows to different things. So that's why it's all weird. There we go. We got our house moved without anything broken. So much better. Okay, so now we can move an entire house. So if I want to move the other house, the purple house, and I don't have to recreate this really complex code again. And I don't have to worry about someone accidentally breaking my house because they moved it and they forgot to move the windows with the house or anything like that. So this is a really useful thing to do. So I'm going to go ahead here and call move house again, and I'm going to put this at -200, -100. Let's see what happens. There we go. Purple house has moved. Great. We're working great. So here's the really cool thing about objects is once we create them, we can actually save them. We can actually make our own code snippets and blocks. So if you really like what you built, go to the subject and hit custom. And you can create your own block. So I'm going to hit create block, and I'm going to call this house block. So this is going to be the house block, and I'm going to copy all the code that makes the house object. Not this stuff below. That's just basically the creating a house, but all of this class, everything that's under it. So everything indented. So including those things. And I'm just going to paste it right into here. Whoops. Helps if you actually select and copy. And I'm just going to paste it right into there. And you'll see all the codes there. And I'm going to hit save. And now I have a house block. That's all my code. All there. So I hope you found this really useful. And I hope you do and make your own one and post it below in the understanding challenge. And don't forget to take the quiz at the end too. You're gonna learn a little bit there too. And then we're moving on to the next module where we start the idea of making our own game. So we're getting near the end of this, but there's been a lot of fun I hope you've had so far. So let's keep going.